Welcome to our exploration of one of life's most fascinating intersections, where ancient Stoic philosophy meets our modern understanding of love and relationships. I'm delighted you've joined us on this intellectual journey that might just transform how you view your connections with others. Love, that powerful, often overwhelming emotional force that has inspired countless poems, songs, and works of art throughout human history. We chase it, celebrate it, and sometimes suffer tremendously because of it. But what would the ancient Stoics say about our modern romantic pursuits? How might their wisdom, developed over 2,000 years ago, offer us a paradoxical path to happiness in our relationships today? The Stoics, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, these philosophers developed a sophisticated system of thought focused on virtue, rationality, and emotional resilience. At first glance, Stoicism might seem antithetical to our contemporary notions of passionate love. After all, isn't Stoicism about emotional restraint while love is about emotional expression? This apparent contradiction is precisely what makes our topic so intriguing. Let me share a provocative idea that will guide our discussion. The Stoics would argue that much of our relationship suffering stems not from a lack of love, but from our fundamental misunderstanding of what love actually is. Our cultural narratives often portray love as an uncontrollable force that happens to us. We fall in love. We're struck by Cupid's arrow. We're lovesick. The Stoics would challenge these passive metaphors. Instead, the Stoic perspective suggests something revolutionary, that true love is not primarily an emotion but a practice of virtue, a deliberate choice we make repeatedly. This doesn't mean Stoics rejected emotional attachment. Rather, they understood that the most fulfilling relationships emerge when we approach love with wisdom, self-discipline, and a clear understanding of what is within our control and what isn't. Consider this paradox. By loving more wisely, with less desperate clinging and more thoughtful attention, we might actually experience deeper, more meaningful connections. The Stoics would suggest that our modern romantic suffering often stems from unreasonable expectations, excessive dependence on others for our happiness, and confusion about what truly matters in relationships. Throughout this series, we'll explore how Stoic principles like focusing on what you can control, practicing virtue regardless of outcomes, and maintaining emotional resilience can transform your approach to relationships. We'll examine how concepts like amor fati, the love of one's fate, might help us navigate the inevitable challenges of intimate partnerships. But let me be clear, this is not about becoming emotionally detached or coldly rational in your relationships. The Stoic approach to love isn't about feeling less. It's about loving better. It's about developing the wisdom to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy attachments, between love that expands our capacity for virtue and love that diminishes it. Think about your own experiences with love and relationships for a moment. How often has suffering come from expecting others to behave exactly as you wish? How frequently have you tied your happiness entirely to another person's actions or feelings toward you? The Stoics would gently suggest that this approach inevitably leads to disappointment. As we begin this journey together, I invite you to approach these ideas with both intellectual curiosity and personal reflection. The Stoic perspective on love challenges many of our cultural assumptions, yet it offers a surprisingly practical framework for building more resilient, meaningful relationships. In the coming segments, we'll explore specific Stoic practices for cultivating healthier love, examine how to apply these ancient insights to modern relationship challenges, and consider what it truly means to love someone while maintaining your own emotional sovereignty. We'll discuss how to navigate relationship difficulties with Stoic resilience, and how to practice love as a form of virtue rather than mere sentiment. The path we're about to explore might seem paradoxical. How can emotional restraint lead to deeper love? How can accepting the impermanence of relationships make them more meaningful? How can loving more wisely lead to greater happiness? These apparent contradictions contain profound insights that have the potential to transform not just how you love others, but how you understand yourself. Let us begin this exploration together, with open minds and a willingness to question our most cherished assumptions about love and happiness. Having introduced the paradoxical relationship between Stoicism and love, let's now delve deeper into how the Stoics fundamentally reconceived what it means to love someone. This perspective challenges our modern romantic narratives in ways that might initially feel counterintuitive, but ultimately offer profound liberation. The ancient Stoics would likely be fascinated, perhaps even disturbed, by our contemporary portrayal of love as something that happens to us, rather than something we choose. Consider the language we use. We fall in love, as if tumbling helplessly into an abyss. We speak of being lovesick, as though affection were a disease. We describe ourselves as crazy about someone, suggesting love diminishes our rationality. Seneca, one of Stoicism's most eloquent advocates, would challenge this framing entirely. He wrote, "No one can love another more than himself," highlighting that love begins with our internal choices rather than external circumstances. For Stoics, true love isn't accidental, it's intentional. It isn't primarily emotional, it's ethical. It isn't about possession, it's about appreciation. This perspective radically reorients our approach to relationships. If love is fundamentally a choice, a practiced virtue rather than an uncontrollable emotion, then we bear responsibility for how we love. This doesn't diminish love's importance. Rather, it elevates it from mere sentiment to principled action. Epictetus, once a slave who became one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, emphasized that we should focus exclusively on what lies within our control. In relationships, this means recognizing a profound truth. We cannot control whether someone loves us, but we can control how we love them. We cannot ensure a relationship will last forever, but we can ensure our behavior remains virtuous throughout its duration. Imagine approaching relationships with this mindset. The anxiety of wondering, "Do they love me enough?" transforms into the more empowering question, "Am I loving wisely and well?" The fear of rejection diminishes when we understand that our worth isn't determined by another's ability to recognize it. The desperate clinging to relationships loosens when we acknowledge that nothing external, not even love, is necessary for our eudaimonia, our flourishing. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his Meditations about seeing people as they truly are, with all their flaws and virtues, while still choosing to treat them with kindness. This represents the Stoic ideal of clear-eyed love, seeing reality accurately without illusions, yet still choosing compassion and care. It means loving someone not because they're perfect, but because you've chosen to practice love toward them, imperfections and all. This perspective offers a solution to the painful disappointment many experience in relationships. When we expect others to complete us, to fulfill all our needs, to never change or disappoint us, we set ourselves up for inevitable suffering. The Stoic approach suggests instead that we love others while maintaining our internal sovereignty, our emotional resilience. Consider how this reframing might transform your own relationship experiences. What if, instead of measuring love by how intensely you feel it, you measured it by how consistently you practice it? What if, rather than seeing relationship challenges as obstacles to happiness, you viewed them as opportunities to practice virtue, patience, understanding, forgiveness, courage? Importantly, the Stoic conception of love doesn't ask us to suppress our emotions or become coldly rational. Rather, it invites us to experience emotions fully while not being governed by them. It suggests that the most profound forms of love emerge when we're not desperately seeking to fill an internal void, but are instead offering our complete, self-sufficient presence to another. This brings us to a central Stoic paradox about love. By needing less from others emotionally, we become capable of loving them more completely. By accepting the temporary nature of all relationships, we can appreciate them more deeply in the present. By recognizing that external things, even relationships, cannot be the source of our happiness, we create the conditions for more authentic connections. The Stoics would suggest that many modern relationship problems stem from category errors, mistaking preferences for necessities, conflating love with possession, confusing emotional intensity with depth of connection. Their wisdom offers a recalibration, helping us distinguish between the ephemeral aspects of relationships and their enduring essence. As we continue our exploration, consider this question. What would change in your relationships if you approached love as a practice rather than a feeling? How might your interactions transform if you focused on loving well rather than being loved adequately? The Stoic perspective suggests that this shift might not only reduce your suffering, but paradoxically deepen your capacity for meaningful connection. In our next segment, we'll explore specific Stoic practices for cultivating this wiser, more resilient form of love, techniques that remain remarkably relevant despite the centuries that separate us from these ancient philosophers. Having explored how Stoicism reframes love as a chosen practice rather than an uncontrollable emotion, let's now examine specific techniques these ancient philosophers offer for cultivating more resilient, meaningful relationships. These practices form a coherent system that paradoxically leads to greater freedom within our connections to others. The first essential practice is what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. In relationships, this means consciously acknowledging their inherent fragility. Epictetus advised, "When you kiss your child, remember that you kiss a mortal." This isn't morbid pessimism, but rather a profound technique for deepening appreciation. Imagine holding your partner's hand while genuinely acknowledging that one day, whether through conflict, circumstance, or death, this connection will end. Rather than diminishing love, this awareness can infuse ordinary moments with extraordinary meaning. The contemporary philosopher Alain de Botton notes that intimacy is the capacity to be rather weird with someone, and finding that that's okay with them. The Stoic would add, intimacy is also the courage to acknowledge impermanence together, and finding that this awareness deepens your connection. The second practice involves distinguishing between attachment and love. Seneca wrote, "He who fears losing has already lost." Attachment, the desperate clinging to relationships out of fear, creates suffering. True love, by contrast, includes an element of freedom. It says, "I choose you, not because I need you to complete me, but because I wish to share my complete self with you." Consider how this distinction might transform your relationships. When we love without excessive attachment, we listen more attentively because we're not preoccupied with how responses might affect us. We offer support without expecting reciprocation. We express ourselves more honestly because our sense of worth isn't contingent on the relationship's continuation. The third Stoic practice involves focusing on what Marcus Aurelius called the directing mind, both yours and others. Rather than being distracted by physical appearance, social status, or even compatibility and preferences, Stoicism suggests we attend to character. Do you and your partner strive toward wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation? Do you help each other become more virtuous human beings? This focus fundamentally alters relationship dynamics. Arguments become opportunities to practice patience rather than threats to ego. Differences become occasions for learning rather than sources of frustration. Even relationship endings, when necessary, can be approached with dignity rather than desperation. The fourth practice involves what modern psychologists might call radical acceptance. Epictetus advised, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well." In relationships, this means accepting others exactly as they are, not as projects to fix or idealized versions we've constructed. This acceptance doesn't mean enduring mistreatment or abandoning boundaries. Rather, it means seeing clearly without the distortion of unrealistic expectations. It means loving the actual person before you, not the potential person you imagine they could become with enough pressure or time. Perhaps most counterintuitively, Stoicism suggests that the key to deeper love lies in cultivating self-sufficiency. Paradoxically, by developing your internal resources, your capacity for meaning, virtue, and tranquility independent of others, you become capable of more authentic connection. When you no longer approach relationships from a position of emotional hunger, you can offer presence rather than need. As we conclude our exploration, let's consider the ultimate paradox Stoicism offers regarding love. By accepting its impermanence, we deepen our capacity to experience it fully. By relinquishing control over others' feelings toward us, we gain mastery over our own approach to relationships. By needing less, we become able to give more. The Stoic path to love isn't easy. It requires confronting our fears of loss, abandoning cultural myths about romantic destiny, and developing inner resilience. Yet the reward is profound. Relationships characterized by clarity rather than confusion, choice rather than compulsion, appreciation rather than possession. In a world that often treats relationships as consumer products to be upgraded when no longer satisfying, Stoicism offers a radical alternative. It suggests that the most meaningful connections emerge not when we find the perfect person, but when we practice loving imperfect people with awareness, intention, and virtue. The ancient Stoics, despite writing centuries ago, speak directly to our modern relationship challenges. They remind us that love isn't something that happens to us, but something we practice. They suggest that the path to relationship happiness doesn't lie in finding someone who will never hurt or leave us, but in developing the internal resources to love well regardless of outcome. As you reflect on your own relationships through this Stoic lens, consider, how might your connections transform if you approach love as a chosen virtue rather than an uncontrollable emotion? What would change if you focused less on being loved perfectly and more on loving wisely? The paradoxical wisdom of Stoicism suggests that in this shift of perspective lies not just resilience in the face of relationship challenges, but the possibility of a deeper, more authentic form of connection, one that embraces reality while still choosing love.